Hey guys! Today we're looking at a very short but very instructive online chess game in the Budapest defense, Fajarowicz Variation. This is exactly the kind of game that proves something important in chess. A move can look completely normal and still lose almost instantly. This is an online game, so the player details are unclear, but the chess ideas are very real, very practical, and honestly, very useful for anyone who plays d4 or wants an aggressive weapon against d4. So let's go through it carefully.
White begins with pawn to d4, and black replies knight to f6. Very normal start. Then white plays pawn to c4, grabbing more space in the center. And now black goes for pawn to e5. This is the Budapest defense. Now from an engine point of view, this is not the most accurate move available. A more solid option was pawn to e6, going into more standard queen's pawn positions. But this is important. Even if e5 is not the engine's top choice, it is a very dangerous practical opening. Especially in online chess, the Budapest defense is a great surprise weapon because it immediately creates tension and asks white to solve problems early. White accepts the gambit with pawn takes e5, and black responds with knight to e4. This is the Fajarowicz variation, one of the sharpest versions of the Budapest defense. Instead of the more common knight jump to g4, black puts the knight directly on e4, aiming for activity, pressure, and tactical chances. So already the tone of the game is clear. Black is not trying to play a quiet positional game. Black wants active pieces, quick pressure, and tactical opportunities. White continues with pawn to a3. This is a playable move. It stops any future bishop check on b4, and it's a useful waiting move in some queen's pawn structures. Black now plays pawn to d6, attacking the pawn on e5 and asking white how they want to handle the center. And here we reach the first important turning point. White plays pawn takes d6. Now this move looks very natural. A lot of players would make it automatically. You trade the pawn, simplify the center, and assume everything is under control. But this is actually white's first critical mistake. The better move here was queen to c2. Why is queen to c2 stronger? Because it does several useful things at once. It keeps pressure on the knight on e4, it helps white hold the extra pawn, and it develops the queen to an active square, so after queen to c2, white keeps a cleaner edge. But after pawn takes d6, black gets exactly what black wanted. Bishop takes d6, and now black's bishop is beautifully developed. This is the key positional point in the opening. That bishop on d6 is not just a recapturing move. It becomes a very active attacking piece aimed toward the king side. It starts looking at squares like g3 and puts pressure in the direction of white's king. So what looked like a simple pawn exchange has actually helped black improve piece activity a lot. And this is a very important lesson in opening play. Sometimes the move that looks safe actually helps your opponent's development. Now we come to the biggest moment in the game. White plays pawn to g3. At first glance, this move looks completely normal. It looks healthy. It looks logical. It looks like white simply wants to fianchetto the bishop, put the bishop on g2, castle kingside, and continue normal development. But in this position, g3 is the losing move. This is the critical mistake that changes everything. The better move here was knight to d2, and that move is very important to understand. If white plays knight to d2, white develops a piece and immediately challenges black's knight on e4. That reduces black's attacking chances, keeps the position under control, and makes it much harder for black to create tactics around the king. But with g3, white focuses only on their own plan and ignores black's active pieces. And that is the real problem. Look at black's setup. The knight on e4 is aggressively placed, the bishop on d6 is already aimed toward the king side, so before playing a move like g3, white needed to ask, what is black threatening? That question is everything here. Because once white plays g3, black immediately finds the tactical shot. Knight takes f2. This is the key combination. It is a classic tactical idea based on the weakness of the f2 square. And notice how simple it is. Black is not winning because of a deep 20-move engine line. Black is winning because white allowed a basic tactical pattern. Drag the king out open lines, then attack with the bishop after knight takes f2. White's king is forced to capture. So white plays king takes f2. And now the king is exposed far too early. White has almost no development, and the king has been dragged out into the open. Now comes the finishing move. Bishop takes g3 check. This is the whole point. Black wins the bishop's target on g3, gives check, and at the same time wins back the knight sacrifice. So black is not just attacking, black is also recovering material. And this final position is completely miserable for white. Let's break down why white resigns here. First, white's king is exposed on f2. Second, black has won back the sacrificed piece. Third, black has also picked up extra material because the g3 pawn falls. And finally, white has almost no development at all. White's queenside pieces are sleeping. The king is unsafe. Black's pieces are active, and black's attack is still easier to play. So even though the game is very short, the reason for the resignation is completely understandable. Now let's summarize the critical moments, because this is where the real educational value is. The first important decision was black choosing pawn to e5, the Budapest defense. Not the engine's top choice, but a very dangerous practical opening. The second critical moment was white playing pawn takes d6. That move looked natural, but it allowed bishop takes d6, giving black smooth development and active piece play. The better move was queen to c2, keeping pressure on the knight and holding the extra pawn more effectively. The biggest turning point was pawn to g3. That move looked like standard development, but in reality it ignored black's tactical setup. The better move was knight to d2, challenging the knight on e4 and reducing black's attacking chances. Then black punished the mistake perfectly with knight takes f2, forcing king takes f2, and then bishop takes g3 check. That sequence is the tactical pattern you want to remember. So what are the practical lessons from this game? Lesson 1. In sharp openings like the Budapest defense, do not assume that normal-looking developing moves are always safe. Lesson 2. Before every move, ask, what is my opponent threatening right now? White's plan with g3 made sense in isolation, but it completely failed once you looked at black's knight and bishop. Lesson 3. Watch the f2 square. In many openings, especially gambits and active defenses, the f2 square can become the center of tactical ideas very quickly. Lesson 4. Development matters more than greed. White won a pawn early, but then gave black easy activity. If your opponent gets active pieces, and your king is still in the center, material alone will not save you. And finally, this game is a perfect example of why the Budapest defense, Fajarowicz Variation, remains so dangerous in online chess. Even if it is not the engine's favorite opening, it creates practical problems immediately, and one inaccurate decision can end the game in just a few moves. So if you play d4 as white, you need to know this pattern. And if you want an aggressive opening for black against d4, this line is definitely worth studying.